Listen, children, to a story that was written long ago about a warlord named Muhammad who deceived and pillaged and raped and killed. But he said he was a prophet, and the naive men believed, and they followed and they conquered, all in the name of peaceful Islam. Go ahead and kill the kafir, go ahead and conquer the land. Do it in the name of Allah and the self-proclaimed prophet. But no, 72 virgins are not waiting for you when you die. The religion of lust and power has already given you its reward. But won't you listen to another who was named Yeshua? They pierced his hands and pierced his feet. For us he humbly died. But he rose up on the third day, as it was prophesied, and he reigns in glorious heaven, yet he lives here in our hearts. Go ahead and kill the kafir, go ahead and conquer the land. Do it in the name of Allah and the self-proclaimed prophet. But no, 72 virgins are not waiting for you when you die. The religion of lust and power has already given you its reward.
Allah is a false God, a false God, a false God. Allah is a false God, a false God. Allah is a false God, a false God, a false God. Allah is a false God, a false God. And Muhammad is not a prophet. Muhammad is not a prophet. If you want grace and mercy and love, Islam is not for you. But Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus is the King of Kings who died to save us all. If you just repent and believe he took your sins on the cross, then mercy and grace, forgiveness and love, eternity can be yours. But Allah is a false God, a false God, a false God. Allah is a false God, a false God.
Hallelujah. Let Lord Jesus Christ shine forth. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you for joining another live stream with DCCI Ministries. And another sad evening. We did a sad live stream yesterday, and then follow up another sad live stream tonight. We will be looking at grooming gangs, which documentary kind of came up approximately 2 weeks ago. Last week we did part 1. We watched half of the documentary, and this week we are joining with Sister M and Daughter of Christ to kind of finish the documentary. Documentary can be seen on GB News, and I did put the link to the previous live stream, which was last week. I'll make sure I put the link to tonight's live stream as well. If you want to watch the video without our comments, please do so. And let's do sound check and then figure out where we left last week. Beloved, Daughter of Christ is here. Daughter of Christ, how are you doing, sister?
I'm well, sister. I've eaten a little bit of some very nice homemade bread, and I got something in the chat. Sister Carol B suggested David Wood needs to send one of his custom-made Qurans to the headmaster at Kettlethorpe. What do you think?
Well, that guy is dhimmi. Head teacher is very much dhimmi. I think if David Wood sends the book, probably head teacher will go to mosque and then ask mosque to hire someone and then get rid of David Wood, or will go to the police and then ask police to find ways to get the US and then arrest David Wood. I wouldn't be surprised when Dimmis does such a thing, but we can pass that request to David Wood, or you can pass it, probably you are following his live streams as well. Beloved, can we do quick sound check? So without me to talking, just how are you doing?
Oh, me.
I don't call Sister M beloved.
Why not?
I'll call you beloved.
I'm doing well, sister. I'm very happy to be here. We've had quite difficult subjects on the live streams recently, and I know people are affected by it. It is when it comes to Islam, unfortunately. I find Islam is a very troublesome religion. It's always in the news, even though when it's a minority, always in the news. If it's not grooming gangs, it's some terrorist attack. It's some child that's been victimized for Quran transgressions. They're always in the news somehow, either victimizing someone or pretending to be victims themselves. That's what I think.
Seems your sound is great. Thank you very much, beloved. Yes, Islam is troubling religion. And I do have Sister M on the line. You met with Sister M last week, but I'll ask her to introduce herself and say hi to us. Sister M, how are you doing?
Peace of Christ be with you, sister. Nice to see you. Nice to hear your voice.
Okay, how are you doing? Who are you, sister?
I am doing well, thank you. I am a Christian and also have a burden on my heart to reach out to the lost. And Islam is, people that follow Islam are very much lost. It's nice to hear Daughter of Christ's voice as well. God bless you all. And since our brother Jai is not here, I'd like to say God bless you all to those in the chat and those who will watch later on.
See, in the team, we've got, like, she's not part of the team, but in this live stream, we've got some thoughtful people. I never kind of acknowledge the chat. Daughter of Christ does, Brother Jai does, and now Sister M does. It doesn't work well for me. So your sound is good, Sister M. Can you be kind enough and remind us, why did you end up in this live stream?
It was a lot of bullying. No, last week we started watching the documentary. It was a very hard documentary to watch. And I'm grateful to all the people that were able to watch it along with us, and were also asking for the link to that original video from GB News. So we started it last week. We managed to get a part way through, and this week we are completing that very same episode.
You are so British. You are so polite, British, with the complimentary, sister. Thank you very much for joining us. So last week, we looked at the documentary approximately 40 minutes something from GB News. And we did kind of halfway through. Beloved, anything kind of, you remember anything you want to bring our attention, what we saw? So what I'm thinking is, today we pick up where the journalist is meeting with the Mrs. Police. But before that, anything kind of got your attention? Anything you want to remind people?
It was just shocking, sister, that it seemed that the authorities, the police, knew about the grooming gangs and girls being groomed, and didn't do anything about it for fear of being branded racist, because of the group that was doing the raping belonged to the protected group. And when you're in a protected group, it seems you're also protected from the law. So it seemed that people weren't to be taken seriously. The children were branded as, oh, they want to be part of it. They won't make good witnesses in court. There's no funds to prosecute. So much so that a charity had to be made, sister, and they tried to further the cause of these children. And eventually an investigation showed massive failings by the police and social services and other services that are meant to protect children. And it seemed that they knew all along that those things were happening, and they turned a blind eye on purpose. And people included were high up in certain political parties, people who were involved so much so that they were giving criminals a way out in certain instances. For example, to hand over the child and we'll let you go type thing, without being held to account for those crimes. What about you, sister? What do you remember?
Let's ask Sister M, and then we pick up from there. Sister M, anything kind of you want to bring our attention before we watch the second part of the video?
Yes, certainly the things that our sister, Daughter of Christ, mentioned about how the police knew and didn't do anything about it, didn't protect these children, and whether or not a child would be a good witness. There was some damning evidence against the perpetrators, and they still did not prosecute. So whether or not a child wants to stand in court and say something, and in fact, oftentimes children that give evidence in court don't actually have to appear in court. They can appear via a live link. Even so, it's the government's responsibilities. It's the law enforcement's responsibility to prosecute those perpetrators, because these are children. They are not adults. They are not responsible, and they can't be treated as adults in those situations.
And any of you remember this risky business charity worker was expressing what is the reason they wouldn't move forward? Yes, one of the reasons was children wouldn't be good witness, but also it would be the breach of the human rights of those abusers or those criminals. Anyone remember that statement?
I remember that, but I still don't understand it. How on earth is it a breach of their human rights to take them to court for a crime they committed?
Well, it will be gone under the racism. And it was the same lady who also had to go to the course of equality and diversity.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that one?
Oh, yeah.
So because the report was showing it was mainly Muslim Pakistani men who were involved grooming these girls, raping these girls, using those girls into the prostitution. So those charity workers end up in the diversity and equality and diversity course. And any of you remember the part where second report is being published, where it has been expressed that council is in denial, police is in denial, and then they had to change the certain phrases to make more political correct report. Any of you remember that?
I remember something like men
of certain ethnicity engaged in a particular occupation.
Yes, which is just long for Pakistani drivers, taxi drivers, basically.
Or Pakistani kebab shoppers.
Yeah.
Anyone remembers the part where it has been mentioned those girls needs it is fashion these days for white girls to have Asian boyfriends?
I heard that.
Yeah. So that's apparently police expressed. And then also it was expressed that when a girl went to the police station to report what was happening to her, the groomer called her and then said they've got her family. Yeah. And then they even harmed her. I think it was her brother.
Broke his legs.
Broke the brother's leg, as well as they had her sister. So she expressed to the police that police cannot protect her and her family. Therefore, she couldn't kind of move on with her statement. And also some of the girls who were rescued from house which was known to the police for using those girls as a prostitute, girls are being rescued from there not by police, even though police kind of caught some of the rapes as rape was taking place, but they are not being rescued by police. They were rescued by charity workers. That was I thought that was interesting because, again, police turn blind eye. Charity workers steps in to rescue those girls. Anyone wants to add anything? If not, I'll kind of start sharing the video and then we pick up from there.
Go ahead, sister.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the video approximate from 19 minutes, which will give us kind of summary of first part, and then around 22 minutes, I think 22 minutes is where the new part of the video is going to start. As I said, this video has been taken from GB News for the video title Grooming Gangs Britain's Shame. And then let's pick up from there.
Sexual exploitation and trafficking.
Act Central 1 had ended. We were told there were no more resources. It were too resource intensive.
Okay, we start from here, and then hopefully we will kind of pick up some things from last week, and then we continue from there. Sister M and Daughter of Christ, if you kind of want to make a comment on anything, just give me the signal. I'll pause it, and then we discuss that.
And that was it. But we could have done so much more.
Why did the police and council fail to kick on with their success? Casey's report suggested a widespread culture of denial and ignorance. Social workers accepted it as normal that underage girls were taking drugs, being made to give sexual services, and having pregnancies or abortions. Of one 13-year-old, given alcohol and abused, they wrote, "She needs more appropriate friends and interests to fill her time." The girl's parents eventually had to move overseas to escape the menace of their rape gang tormentors. After the Casey report's release in 2015, more arrests were finally made. Arshid Hussain, the rapist who handed over an abused girl to PC Hassan Ali at a petrol station, was convicted with his 3 brothers and his uncle, as well as 2 white women, who lured girls to their homes and pimped them out to the rapists. On the day that PC Ali was told he was under police investigation, he was run over and killed by a family friend. Any investigation into his alleged criminality died with him. The National Crime Agency also launched an ongoing investigation into historic abuse in Rotherham, the largest in their history. So far, they have identified 1,510 victims and hundreds of abusers. Another 20 men have been convicted for their crimes in Rotherham alone. The Casey report singled out Councillor Jahangir Akhtar for his malign influence after he arranged the handover of the raped girl at the petrol station. The Labour Party forced him to resign. Years later, his daughter was given a job at a council-funded charity, giving her access to a database with confidential information on grooming gang victims. There was no suggestion that she did anything wrong, but victims said there was a potential conflict of interest. After the Casey report revealed council failures, an investigation into the police was launched by the Independent Police Complaints Commission. They found that the father of a girl who was raped in Clifton Park and suffered internal injuries was told by a police officer that he hoped it would teach her a lesson. They found that police officers, finding girls in bed with older men or even in the middle of a sex act, failed to do anything. Worried parents were told that having an Asian boyfriend was just a fashion accessory their daughters would grow out of. There were 265 allegations of misconduct, with 91 investigations involving 47 officers. Of those, only 5 suffered any penalties. Nobody was fired. To find out why nobody in the police had been punished, I went to see the only whistleblower to resign from the police over the rape gang's cover-up. My name is Charlie Peters. I'm a journalist and documentary filmmaker with GB News, and I'm investigating the national grooming gang scandal. We've seen what happened in Rotherham, where over 1,500 girls were sexually exploited. I want to know why the police looked the other way, despite years of evidence.
I couldn't get any answers. all I was told was that there was insufficient evidence to prosecute.
I was raped over 1,000 times and I don't even know how many men assaulted me. It's impossible to recall. It was just so constant.
To understand why they failed so badly, I'm going to Manchester, where in Rochdale, a similar scandal took place. I'm meeting with the only whistleblower to resign from the police over the grooming gang's cover-up.
Well, in 2004, I was approached and asked to join, to go on board with a job that became known as Operation Augusta. And this was we had a little girl who had died in Rochdale, who had been groomed, sexually abused. I was asked to go on an investigation to look at whether we had a problem in Greater Manchester with young white children being groomed and sexually abused by gangs of Pakistani men.
Greater Manchester did have a problem with grooming gangs. The little girl who died, Victoria Agoglia, was 15 years old when in 2003 she was groomed by a rape gang and then killed by a heroin overdose given to her by an abuser.
We had dozens of young, very vulnerable children who were mainly in care, well, they were all living in care, who were being systematically groomed and raped by gangs of Pakistani men.
Over 18 months, Maggie and her team compiled a compelling case against the gangs they knew were operating in Rochdale.
Okay, I'll pause here for a bit. Sister have you got anything you would like to share? So far, we are hearing from police officer, previously who was police officer. She's the only one who left the job because she couldn't stand anymore what was happening. She's expressing she spent months to put together a case where, as an officer, she says white girls are being abused and raped by Pakistani men. And if you remember from the previous video, previous part, the girl was being kidnapped, and then at the petrol station, there was a hangover took place, and then the kidnapper kind of just gave the girl and then was free to go. So it seems there is something not right with the approach of police. What are your thoughts on that so far?
Yeah, it's mind-blowing that a police officer would say, oh, yes, you've kidnapped this child. Yes, that's fine. Just pass them to me and you don't have to worry about anything. That's not how a kidnapper should be treated. I see Harriel Johnson's response there is disgraceful. It's unbelievable. And that's only one police officer was so mortified by what had happened that they stepped down from their job. And it was only this one woman.
Yeah, out of many, one woman couldn't take it anymore. Yeah. Beloved, any thoughts, any comments so far what we heard?
What I heard in the beginning with all these allegations, I think more than 240, and all these officers, it seems like a lot of officers and a lot of allegations. So it seems like it's something that the police would have known about. It's widespread, lots of people involved. So to me, it's not just that they failed to act. I'm thinking are they conspiring with this? Back home where I come from, the police are known to make deals with gangs on the streets and things like that, or let some things go, let the small fish go, or something like that for favors from them later on. They work a bit like they're part of the gang. That's what it seems like to me.
That seems you came from Turkey.
No, I didn't, but it's very similar where I came from.
Yeah. So also now we were in Rotherham. Now we are moving to Manchester. So it seems the problem they had in Rotherham is also the similar problem they are having in Manchester. So two different cities, council and police fails, it seems to me. So it's ongoing problem in Britain. And so she's expressing, she kind of start taking the job in 2004. We are 2023, so 20 years ago. and sadly not much is done. Shall I continue?
Yes.
On an investigation to look at whether we had a problem in Greater Manchester with young white children being groomed and sexually abused by gangs of Pakistani men.
Greater Manchester did have a problem with grooming gangs. The little girl who died, Victoria Agoglia, was 15 years old when in 2003 she was groomed by a rape gang and then killed by a heroin overdose given to her by an abuser.
We had dozens of young, very vulnerable children who were mainly in care, well, they were all living in care, who were being systematically groomed and raped by gangs of Pakistani men.
Over 18 months, Maggie and her team compiled a compelling case against the gangs they knew were operating in Rochdale. But she had to take a break from the investigation when her husband fell terminally ill.
And at that point, we had 100 paedophiles on a database that we knew were raping children. We had about 3 dozen children that we had identified as being abused. So that job was a full singing and dancing major investigation. You know, my job was done and I went off work content and happy to know that those men were going to be prosecuted.
But when Maggie returned from compassionate leave after the death of her husband, she found that Operation Augusta had been closed down. None of the abusers were convicted.
I couldn't get any answers. All I was told was that there was insufficient evidence to prosecute. And I knew, because I had been working on that job from day one, I knew we had the evidence.
The last information placed on the police database for the operation was on the 6th of July 2005, one day before the 7/7 terror attacks in London.
There was a gold level meeting within GMP, and that means the most senior officers in GMP, that they had a meeting and that the decision was made at that meeting that they were not prepared to put resources into that investigation.
Was it shut down because revealing the grooming gangs just after an Islamist attack was considered too incendiary? We'll never know, because those minutes were conveniently lost. Years.
Okay, let's pause here for a bit. So, beloved, ex-police officer is expressing he had the names of 100 men who was raping those girls with 3 dozens of girls. Somehow miracle happened, and none of 400 men, there were not sufficient evidence. While police officer says like, oh, I put the case together, but apparently other policies decided to check all the hundreds of individuals and say no.
How much evidence is enough? Because 1 is enough for me. You got 3 dozen children being raped by 100 men, and that's not enough. And then you have this gold meeting, the highest meeting of the highest order, and the minutes are not there. That sounds like a cover-up to me.
That looks like magical to me. Islamic magic.
Like I said, they're part of the gang. They owe a favor to the gang. I thought being racist is victimizing someone because of their race. But no matter what the race is, justice is meant to be blind. If anyone of any race commits a crime, why is it different for one race when they commit a crime to another race? That is racism, if you think about it. You let one race go free. Those ethnic men of a certain occupation, why do they get to be let go free? That's racist to the others, isn't it?
Yep. Sister M, any thoughts you have, or you would like to add anything what Daughter of Christ said?
No, I totally agree with what Daughter of Christ said. I have nothing further to add.
Would you like to share any comments on so you've got 6th of July event in London, and then 7/7 happens, and then last kind of information or last kind of entrance regarding that these Britain's rape gangs are just day before. Journalist kind of made a thought. He brought up a thought to our attention to say, is there a chance that they didn't want to come across, or they didn't want to hurt the feelings of Islamists, therefore like everything is being shut down? Because Mrs. Police officer expressed that they were all Pakistani Muslim men.
It's hard to escape that link, isn't it?
Yeah.
That just the day before there was more evidence being added to this already mounting evidence, where she was confident that everything could go to trial no problem. And following day, the atrocities happened on 7/7, and all of a sudden it all disappears.
Yeah. Magical Islamic touch here, I feel. But I haven't studied law of Britain, so I don't know that much. I just feel something is dodgy. And Daughter of Christ expressed there is something injustice here. Let's continue.
But she had to take a break from the investigation when her husband fell terminally ill.
And at that point, we had 100 paedophiles on a database that we knew were raping children. We had about 3 dozen children that we had identified as being abused. So that job was a full singing and dancing major investigation. You know, my job was done, and I went off work content and happy to know that those men were going to be prosecuted.
But when Maggie returned from compassionate leave after the death of her husband, she found that Operation Augusta had been closed down. None of the abusers were convicted.
I couldn't get any answers. All I was told was that there was insufficient evidence to prosecute. And I knew, because I had been working on that job from day one, I knew we had the evidence.
The last information placed on the police database for the operation was on the 6th of July 2005, one day before the 7/7 terror attacks in London.
There was a gold level meeting within GMP, and that means the most senior officers in GMP, that they had a meeting and that the decision was made at that meeting that they were not prepared to put resources into that investigation.
Was it shut down because revealing the grooming gangs just after an Islamist attack was considered too incendiary? We'll never know, because those minutes were conveniently lost. Years later, Maggie was brought back in for a new operation to tackle the gangs.
I was reapproached in 2010 and asked to go on board a case in Rochdale, which became known as Operation Span.
Maggie was asked to join the team to gain the trust of a young girl called Ruby, who, aged just 12, had been raped by known paedophile Adil Khan.
When she was just 13, she had been made pregnant by that man. And the police at the time, which had been 2 years previous to that, had seized a fetus.
But despite having the frozen fetus and the DNA needed to prove the identity of Ruby's rapist, Adil Khan was not charged with rape.
Ruby, you know, we had a fetus. We knew who had made her pregnant, but the authorities failed to protect her. The schools knew, social services knew, the police knew. And even though we all knew, even though we had DNA, even though we knew who was responsible, that man was still never charged with rape.
Sister M, we've got 13 years old girl who was pregnant. School knew about it. Police knew about it. Everyone knew about it. Everyone knew who raped her. But the person was able to get away. Any thoughts, any feelings you would like to express?
Yeah, it's insanity. It's evil. It's insane. It's beyond comprehension, really. They even had the DNA of her child to prove that that was the rapist. There's no such thing as consensual when you're 12 or 13. you're underage, and whether or not the perpetrator alleged that it was consensual, which, by the way, I think all paedophiles tend to say that their victims were consenting. How that perpetrator got away with it? Insane.
So officer kind of befriended her when she was 13. 2 years before that, they had a fetus. Beloved, any thoughts?
He wasn't even charged. So it's not that like they charged him and then in the trial he said it was consensual or anything. They didn't even try. And they got a mountain of evidence. That fetus means this poor child miscarried at a later stage, which is quite common if they're that young, when they get abused and they get pregnant, because their bodies are not yet developed enough to carry a pregnancy to term. So this child went through hell on earth, not only the rape, but then the consequences of it, and was brave enough, to, I don't know how she would understand, for a child to understand there's a fetus and we can get DNA from and all that stuff. And they went through all that for nothing in the end.
Maybe child didn't understand much yet. We have people who we pay. Policies makes their living by our money. Councils make their living by our money. The people we hire to protect our rights, people who we hire to protect the rights of 13-year-old girl, decided, well, I'll let this go.
Yeah, I don't want my money to go to no gold meetings. I don't want my money to go to investigating the tear on the Quran. I want my money, to tax money, to go into charging and prosecuting rapists, especially if it's kids they're raping.
Just another side point to bring our attention is even school knew about it. And they stayed silent too. See, schools are very busy. Yesterday we talked about how school head teachers were very busy being dhimmi at mosques. Now we are hearing school knew about it as well, but no one stand with this girl. And by the way, for the date kind of structure, this police officer involved first case in 2004. And then now she's involved with another case, 2010. Within 6 years, those things are still happening. 6 years passed, and still it is happening, and everyone turned blind eye. Again, victims becomes the criminals, and criminals becomes, well, how can we help you to live more comfortable life? That's what happened to the Great Britain. Shall I continue, sisters?
Yes.
MP that they had a meeting and that the decision was made at that meeting that they were not prepared to put resources into that investigation.
Was it shut down because revealing the grooming gangs just after an Islamist attack was considered too incendiary? We'll never know, because those minutes were conveniently lost. Years later, Maggie was brought back in for a new operation to tackle the gangs.
I was reapproached in 2010 and asked to go on board a case in Rochdale, which became known as Operation Span.
Maggie was asked to join the team to gain the trust of a young girl called Ruby, who, aged just 12, had been raped by known paedophile Adil Khan.
When she was just 13, she had been made pregnant by that man. And the police at the time, which had been 2 years previous to that, had seized a fetus.
But despite having the frozen fetus and the DNA needed to prove the identity of Ruby's rapist, Adil Khan was not charged with rape.
Ruby, we had a fetus. We knew who had made her pregnant, but the authorities failed to protect her. The schools knew, social services knew, the police knew. And even though we all knew, even though we had DNA, even though we knew who was responsible, that man was still never charged with rape.
Ruby's suffering extended to her family. She had a sister, Amber, who had also become a victim of the rape gangs.
Amber had been arrested as a child of 15 on suspicion of being a madam. I was asked to gain her trust and ask her to tell us what had happened, to identify the abusers, to tell us of the locations, the phone numbers.
One of those locations was an address in Fallinge, where there was a house with a list on the back of the door, with about 20 names on it. Abusers could take girls there, pass them around to be raped by multiple men, and then leave a tick by their names to show that they'd used the rape house. At the end of the week or month, they'd pay their bill for using it. It was like a paedophile honesty box. Despite the scale of the crimes, the trial was limited and just 9 men were convicted. The lead defendant said he objected to being tried by an all-white jury. The same man had once forced a 15-year-old girl to have sex with his nephew as a birthday present.
By 2017, all but 2 of the 9 were out of prison, having been released halfway through their sentences. 4 of them had also been granted millions of pounds in legal aid to fight deportation.
Any thoughts, Sister Anne?
Well, apart from sickening, this is millions of pounds granted to these proven paedophiles who were serving a sentence that they didn't complete anyway. Millions of pounds granted to them to fight deportation. Why? Why?
I remember there was a news. One of them had a child, and that child needed father figure.
Right. You need a paedophile rapist father figure. Yeah. Good idea.
Beloved?
I mean, it's gone. They're doing it so openly that they even have a logbook. The list, who's raped who, when. Like they're a business, keeping the books on the back door of their places. And they're so open about it. It's, because they know nothing will happen. They know that the police is quite okay with it. Like I say, police is part of the gang anyway. They let these things happen. They're quite happy with them to happen.
So someone rents a flat, and then every night Mr. Muslim takes girl in, and then other Mr. Muslim comes, and then everyone rapes that girl. Before they leave, they tick which day they used that flat, and they make sure they give their cut for the renting of that flat. And when people stand in front of the judge, they express, well, they don't want to be judged by white judge, because they know if it in a Muslim country, this is not even a crime. Surah 24 verse 33, Surah 33 verse 59, all justification for those kind of things.
Got Sister Marion here saying they're so safe, they sign their name next to it. They have receipts for it. They're a full-blown organization, like they're trading something, like not human beings.
But think about it. House is there, name of the people are there, they put the ticks there, the girl name, probably initials of the girls are there or something, like who I raped. Yet police couldn't do anything.
It's not that they couldn't do, it's that they
choose to not
choose
do.
not to, because they have some backhanded deals with these groups.
Was it in Bristol? One of the occasion, it was the police officer who was involved. He was part of the grooming gangs.
You got people very high up, like the lady said, the golden level meeting, whose interest it is to serve a certain agenda and a certain narrative. And that narrative is Islam is peace, integration. We want everybody to be happy together. We can't speak against anyone of a certain ethnicity and certain occupation, like the report said. But the problem is, though, they're acting against the children. They're committing crime. But that doesn't fit the narrative, you see. Never mind about the children.
Well, everyone is right now upset.
Yeah, I mean, there is a Muslim in the chat, if she's not helping things, saying that Islam has nothing to do with gangs.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm sure Islam has nothing to do with rape either.
There's a reason why there's a certain warning called the Usman warning.
Yeah.
There's a reason why it's called Usman.
There is a warning called Usman warning. Mr. Policeman comes and then tells you, well, your life is in danger. You've got to sign this paper. Or Officer Muhammad calls you and then say, please come to the police station.
Yeah.
And then he says, I am Officer Muhammad.
Yeah. And the gentleman in the chat is called Osman as well.
Well, Surah 4, verse 24. Surah 24, verse 33. And Surah 33, verse 59, used for justification of such actions. Surah 24, 33 expresses, don't put your girls, your mates into prostitution. If you do so, Allah is forgiving. Don't do it, but if you do it, Allah is forgiving. And I am sorry that Mr. Muslim didn't even bother to listen what has been said, because even the police officers identified religion of those people. It is a bit strange, and action is very ugly. Action is being done by certain people group. All of them shares, not all of them, 85% of them shares the common religion. It's not only 85% of them shares the common religion, but also most of those people are named, like name called Muhammad, Hassan, Ali. See, none of them called Jackson.
No.
None of them are called Sebastian. So when you've got those names identified with Muslim people group, and then when those rapists come from the mosque, they just did their Friday prayer, or when they call those girls ask those girls to use Muslim names, or before the raping those girls, if they are praying, then you ask the question, okay, there might be a little bit possibility that those people might be all Muslim. 85% of them are Muslim. Okay, is there anything in Islam those people might be using to justify their action? 85% of those people are from Pakistani Muslim men. Is there anything in their religion can justify what they are doing to these girls. No one needs to be Einstein to answer that question. I'm sorry. Police needed to be Einstein. Sadly, they failed to be Einstein. Schools needed to be Einstein. They failed to be Einstein. Councils needed to be Einstein, and they failed to do so. But beside that, everyone else knows that justified by the religion of Islam. Even when you go to the court hearing of those people, they identify themselves. Oh, those girls were like dirty lollipops. Where were your ears when Mr. Muslim said, I don't want to be judged, I don't recognize the white authority, white judge? Where were your ears when Mr. Muslim states that, when it has been stated that this Mr. Muslim gives those girls as a birthday present to his nephew? Where were your ears? Oh, forget your ears. Forget your brain as well. Where is your heart? Oh, I forgot. You sold your heart and soul to Muhammad. Silly Muslims. Seriously? 21st century, and you think, oh, this has nothing to do with Islam? Yeah, you make very good team with Mr. Policeman. You make very good team with councils, and you make very good team with school. But you will never stand against injustice. Didn't Muhammad give girls to Muhammad give girls to the other Muslims as a present? Did you not even bother to read the biography of Muhammad to see how awful gang leader he was? Did you not even bother to look at the Islamic sources? Oh, I forgot. You sold your heart and your soul without thinking, so you couldn't bother to do that. Sister M, beloved, anyone wants to make any comment on innocent of Mr. Muhammad, Pieces, Police, FBI, and Child Protection? Everyone be upon him.
Muhammad formed the first gang. He called them Muslims, and they did go out, attack people, take their women as sex slaves. The non-believing non-Muslim women as sex slaves. And that was the background of Surah 4, verse 24, the right hand possessed. And you find that in Sahih Hadiths explaining what the right hand possessed are. They even tell you the name of the tribe that they went and conquered and took the women as sex slaves. They call them autas.
And also remember, in that occasion, Muslims are saying we can't rape them. Their husband is still here
alive.
And alive.
Yeah.
And then Muhammad says, just go for it.
Yeah. Sahih Hadith.
So it's not only Muhammad starts the first gang, but Allah, without any shame, Allah justifies that.
Sahih.
Allah and Muhammad is like
they're the first gang. Sahih Hadith, Jami' Tirmidhi 3016. On the day of Autas, we captured some women who had husbands. So the men disliked to be intimate with them. So Allah the Most High revealed Surah 424. Women already married are forbidden except those whom your right hand possessed. So for you to have a right hand possessed, they have to be non-Muslim whom you captured. The grooming gangs capture non-Muslim girls who become possession and they rape them. They become their sex slaves. So what's the difference? They're doing exactly what Muhammad did with his gang back in the 7th century, doing it now in the 21st century.
And Surah 24:34. We can read it from my leftover Quran. I think I didn't tear the 24:34. Prostitution is okay. Allah is forgiving. If you put the girls into the prostitution, Allah forgives you. Yep.
And Muhammad's gang took Safiya from her tribe tortured her husband to death because he refused to tell them that where he put the treasure of the tribe. When he died, he took Safiya as a sex slave. She was given to someone called Dihya, Muhammad's companion. Before people realized who she was of great beauty and status, switched her from Dihya and switched her for some slaves, gave Dihya some slaves and exchanged her as his own.
It's like you went to Marks and Spencer and then bought hummus, but you go and change hummus to something else.
And what we're hearing in these reports is those men switched around, exchanged girls, moved them around themselves to abuse. That's what Muhammad did to Safiya. And then he told her, you either continue as sex slave or I can free you for the price of your freedom. You know how you give women dowry, some money for marriage in Islam? Her dowry was her freedom, even though she was already a sex slave. So she said, yes, of course, she wants to be free. And that's how she became one of your mothers. One of your mothers, the mothers of the believers, started her journey in Islam as a sex slave, right hand possessed by the gang that was Muhammad's gang.
And she expressed that Muhammad is the man she hated most.
Yep.
Sister M, have you got any thoughts, beloved, of Christ?
Yes, our friend in the chat, Usman Ataman, I'm not sure that he's got the sound on because either that or he's hard of hearing. He says, oh, they may be Muslim, but they don't follow Islam if Islam is against all things they are doing. So he seems to think that Islam is against all these things that you've just cited from the Quran, from the Hadith, from the Sirah, that actually Muhammad and his gang, and they were a gang, allowed and perpetrated this kind of behavior. I don't know, hard of hearing or he's got the sound turned down, who knows?
Whatever it is, he's taking that opportunity to come alongside of criminals like Muhammad. Not much difference, Mr. Othman. Shall I continue with the video?
Yes, sister.
Rapist. Adil Khan was not charged with rape.
Ruby, you know, we had a fetus. We knew who had made her pregnant, but the authorities failed to protect her. The schools knew, social services knew, the police knew. And even though we all knew, even though we had DNA, even though we knew who was responsible, that man was still never charged with rape.
Ruby's suffering extended to her family. She had a sister, Amber, who had also become a victim of the rape gangs.
Amber had been arrested as a child of 15 on suspicion of being a madam. I was asked to gain her trust and ask her to tell us what had happened, to identify the abusers, to tell us of the locations, the phone numbers.
One of those locations was an address in Phalange, where there was a house with a list on the back of the door, with about 20 names on it. Abusers could take girls there, pass them around to be raped by multiple men, and then leave a tick by their names to show that they'd used the rape house. At the end of the week or month, they'd pay their bill for using it. It was like a paedophile honesty box. Despite the scale of the crimes, the trial was limited and just 9 men were convicted. The lead defendant said he objected to being tried by an all-white jury. The same man had once forced a 15-year-old girl to have sex with his nephew as a birthday present.
By 2017, all but 2 of the 9 were out of prison, having been released halfway through their sentences. 4 of them had also been granted millions of pounds in legal aid to fight deportation.
Their victims have to live with their abusers, walking around as free men. They see them in the street. They see them at work. They see them in the supermarket.
Both Rotherham and Rochdale are similar in culture and history, former industrial towns in the north of England. But this national scandal scarred towns and cities of all descriptions across the country.
My investigation took me to Telford, a new town in leafy Shropshire, near the Welsh border, where another child sexual exploitation scandal had emerged.
It's here that an inquiry in 2022 found that 1,000 girls had been abused by the gangs since the 1980s. Much of the worst abuse happened in the suburb of Wellington. Children were sold for sex in a rape den. Some council workers reacted by saying that child prostitution had always happened. The gangs here often threatened their victims with the memory of Lucy Lowe, who, aged just 15, was burnt to death with her mother, sister and unborn child by her abuser. To find out why Telford Council had also failed to act, I spoke to Samantha Smith.
So we talked about Rotherham. There was a girl was killed. We talked Rochdale. Another girl was killed. And now Telford, another girl is being killed. These Pakistani Muslim rape gangs are setting an example. If you talk about this, same thing will happen to you. And think about it, those cities has, like for example, one of the city has only 3% Muslim population, yet they are running the city by raping your girls, white British girls. They are not even girls, they are just kids. Any thoughts, beloved?
It's shocking, and it's as this GB News documentary is showing, it's not specific to certain areas. Oh, that's just what happens in Rotherham, or oh, well, you know, Rochdale is kind of similar to Rotherham. It's a northern previously industrial town. This is, and as this documentary progresses, all over England, and most likely into Wales and Scotland and other places where they've congregated. It's a tragedy. And it's a tragedy that they're being allowed to get away with murder, literally allowed to get away with murder.
Well, no one wants to hurt the feelings of Mr. Muslims. Beloved, anything you would like to add?
I can't believe a criminal would dictate what the jury would be like. Especially he's saying, don't want a white jury. Imagine if someone says, I don't want a brown jury or a black jury. People would be outraged. But because the protected group, they can say whatever they like. Well, this is the UK. What do you expect the jury to look like? Chinese? Obviously, they're going to be white. It's like if someone commits a crime back home and they're not from that country, can they say, we don't want a brown jury? You're back home in the Middle East.
Something came to my mind. Mr. Policeman used to send Mr. Muslims to my house, Mr. Muslim police officers to my house. You can see like they are officially Mr. Muslims, okay? When I ask, like, I don't feel safe that you are sending police officers who are Muslim to my house. You should have seen their face and the way they looked at me. And they still send Mr. Muslim police officers to my house, 5 o'clock in the morning. And even like it was last week, I think, Mr. Muslim police officer calls me and then asks me to go to the police station. But I cannot say it is the Muslims who are hunting me down. So don't send Muslim police officers or don't make Muslim police officers to have my details. I cannot say that. But man who is giving a British girl to his nephew as a gift for the birthday so that she meets with the sexual desire of his nephew, can turn to the jury and then say, I don't want jury which is white. And they are saying that in Britain. When they move to this country, or if they're born in this country, they know the ethnicity of this country or what color people live in this country. When I came to Britain, I knew what I will expect. I knew there will be people middle of the night who are half naked outside of the nightclub. I knew there are church buildings in this country. I knew where I am coming to. Somehow, a Mr. Muslim who gives a teenage girl as a gift to his nephew for birthday present doesn't want to be judged by white people. When it is someone's birthday, you give them flower, you give them, I don't know, birthday gift things. You don't give human being to another human being as a gift. And then poor victim, I don't want to be judged by white people.
He was following Muhammad. Muhammad got a gift of a human being, Maria Qibtiyya.
Yeah.
So he's not. So obviously he doesn't want to be judged by white people because they'll be outraged by him following that example. That's racist. Plus,
how come judge doesn't think that's racist, sister?
It's racist, isn't it? Why aren't white people good enough? Same as any other color. I tell you why, because people of this country have certain values that are not of the protected groups. They would be horrified. The difference with you, sister, is you're not charged with any crime with the Mr. Policeman that come to your door. You're a victim of the protected group who are Muslim. That man is charged with a crime. He's a criminal. Do criminals choose their jury? If criminals choose their jury, then there's no justice. Then obviously they'll choose the ones that will give them, a way out. That's insane. And they got that. There's just political correctness and bowing down to the protected group gone crazy. You might as well give them the whole country now. You might as well.
Just those Anyway, so this police officer involves with such events since 2004, continues 2010, 2017, it is still going on. Another helpful point to just remind you, Muslim population in these cities are 3%. They are able to rule, they are able to rape, they are able to get away. And that's only 3%. Can you imagine what happens when they become 51%? Don't imagine that. But think about it. Sister M, have you got anything to add? If not, I'll continue with the video.
That's okay. Continue, sister.
Raped by multiple men, and then leave a tick by their names to show that they'd used the rape house. At the end of the week or month, they'd pay their bill for using it. It was like a paedophile honesty box. Despite the scale of the crimes, the trial was limited and just 9 men were convicted. The lead defendant said he objected to being tried by an all-white jury. The same man had once forced a 15-year-old girl to have sex with his nephew as a birthday present. By 2017, all but 2 of the 9 were out of prison, having been released halfway through their sentences. 4 of them had also been granted millions of pounds in legal aid to fight deportation. Their victims have to live with their abusers, walking around as free men. They see them in the street, they see them at work, they see them in the supermarket. Both Rotherham and Rochdale are similar in culture and history,
former industrial towns in the north of England. But this national scandal scarred towns and cities of all descriptions across the country. My investigation took me to Telford, a new town in leafy Shropshire near the Welsh border, where another child sexual exploitation scandal had emerged. It's here that an inquiry in 2022 found that 1,000 girls had been abused by the gangs since the 1980s. Much of the worst abuse happened in the suburb of Wellington. Children were sold for sex in a rape den. Some council workers reacted by saying that child prostitution had always happened. The gangs here often threatened their victims with the memory of Lucy Lowe, who, aged just 15, was burnt to death with her mother, sister, and unborn child by her abuser. To find out why Telford Council had also failed to act, I spoke to Samantha Smith, a child abuse victim from the town.
I remember when I was 16, my social worker told me that if you were physically abused, why were there no bruises? And that perfectly sums up how I was treated by those in positions of power.
The ignorance and victim blaming that Samantha was subjected to from Telford social workers was eerily similar to the culture exposed by the Casey report into Rotherham Borough Council.
The culture was exactly the same. It was the idea that girls like me were somehow responsible for the abuse we suffered.
The council here didn't just turn a blind eye, it was incompetent. Teams failed to share information, staffing issues meant that there were never enough people to do the work, and the council tried to close down a child abuse unit, citing austerity. But political correctness played a role here too. When teachers confessed that there was a problem in this authority with Pakistani youths abusing girls, they were accused of being racist by a council worker. Detailed reports weren't shared over fears that they could start a race riot. I spoke to another victim of child abuse in Telford. Emily, not her real name, prefers not to appear on camera, but these are...
I'll just pause here. Beloved, any thoughts?
It's the same thing again. Everybody's been given the same script. Protect the protected groups at all costs. We don't want anyone to be called racist, even if it's them who, and the teachers are saying that they're causing that. They're abusing, raping girls, these Pakistani men. Can't say that. Victim blaming, denying what the girls are saying they're responsible. Basically anything, do anything except bring those to account. That's what I see. And it's the same in this town too. So I think it's a nationwide, like everybody in the positions of power have been given the same script to follow. Protect the protected group.
Sister M, any thoughts? Anything you would like to add?
Yeah, just that, you know, if we reverse the situation, if we say that there were a group of white Englishmen who are targeting Pakistani underage girls, there would be outrage, there would be police on every corner, there would be school videos about it, warning these little Pakistani girls about the dangers of white men, and there would be like international outrage. And there would be convictions, and people wouldn't be getting out halfway through. So this is crazy racist.
It's still Pakistani men here too, in this other town.
Yep.
Third town now. So what is it? What is it about them? Like they're all the same. Why?
And even in Telford, there's still like 1% or something.
Why is it not like Chinese men or white men, or why is it always these certain ethnicities?
With certain religion.
Yeah,
no,
why?
Not certain ethnicities.
What do they have in common?
Of a certain profession.
Of the
negotiable.
One of the unique things is here, this time school steps in and expresses concern and school gets shut down. And sad to say, 2023, I don't know if any of you picked up on the news. There are in certain villages in Britain, locals are expressing their concern that young men are outside of the school gates or sitting in the playgrounds and observing the girls and asking the girls, "Are you here by yourself?"
Wow.
Kind of gives us brings concern to our hearts. So I don't think we can kind of say much about it, because people who said about it, it didn't go well for them. But 2023, people are expressing their concerns for people who've got certain non-occupation is waiting outside of the school gates and playgrounds and observing these girls.
Yeah.
And even in south of England, there was a rape case. The girl got raped, and students stand up and then make protest against the rape, and they were labeled. So what happened in Rotherham, Telford, it's happening in different villages today. Same people group or same ideology targeting our next generation.
Breaking our next generation.
Yeah, breaking. Yep. Thanks for that. Yeah, breaking.
Yeah.
Let's continue.
Her words, spoken by an actor. Issues meant that there were never enough people to do the work, and the council tried to close down a child abuse unit, citing austerity. But political correctness played a role here too. When teachers confessed that there was a problem in this authority with Pakistani youths abusing girls, they were accused of being racist by a council worker. Detailed reports weren't shared over fears that they could start a race riot. I spoke to another victim of child abuse in Telford. Emily, not her real name, prefers not to appear on camera, but these are her words, spoken by an actor.
At college, I met Andrea, who was a little bit older, and she introduced me to local Pakistani men who worked in the kebab house in my town in South Wales. We would just go to the kebab house where we'd receive free food, free drink, free cigarettes, free alcohol. It was all just a treat for us, which we loved as young girls. When I was still 14, Andrea took me to the promenade in the town where we met the Pakistani kebab house workers, and then 5 or 6 of them gang raped me. I knew 3 of them from the kebab house, but the others I'd never met before. There were 3 kebab houses in the town, and they all knew each other, and they linked up when they raped me. They were all linked. We were trafficked to Telford, Hereford and Blackpool. I was 14 and 15 during this period when I was raped and trafficked regularly. My mum was so happy that I'd found friends, but she had no idea what was going on.
Just as I'd found in Rotherham and Rochdale, the gangs of abusers used the boyfriend model of exploitation to lure in their victims.
While my abusers threatened, raped and violated me, they were also kind, but it would change. They called us gory girls, white bitches, white slags. When I eventually got my police records back, there are 200 to 300 pages about how I'd been strangled, threatened with a knife, someone was sent to petrol bomb my house. I was raped over 1,000 times, and I don't even know how many men assaulted me. It was just a thing that happened to us, and it might sound crazy, but it was just normal. It felt normal. It's all we knew.
Emily's suffering represents one story in a much wider pattern of abuse. This crisis was not isolated to a few towns. It had swept the country. Reports from Rotherham, Rochdale and Telford.
I'll just pause that and leave that map on the screen for people to see it. Beloved, any thoughts?
Yeah. I can't.
Sister M?
Yes, truly, truly disturbing to hear what this child went through and called it normal because that's all that they knew. And she's not unique. There are hundreds and hundreds of girls, thousands of girls actually since the 80s in Telford that have been victims of this. So many of our children were raised to believe that this was normal. That's a terrifying thought.
All of their life is being destroyed. Their future is being destroyed. Their trust in humanity is being destroyed. Why? Because we didn't want to deal with Pakistani Muslims who were raping our girls. Police choose to turn blind eye. Councils choose to turn blind eye because we thought their feelings are being labeled more important than standing up for those kids.
Horrifying. These are children who are yet to develop their identity, their sense of self. They're still growing up, and they're growing up with this idea that this abuse, this torture, this evil is normal. That's so maddening to just even conceive of.
And look at the map on the screen.
It's not in just one place.
Not one place. From Scotland, from Glasgow to London to Oxford, all those places.
Yeah.
Wherever that certain people group are, our next generation is being raped in that part of the country. Let's continue.
Houses in the town, and they all knew each other, and they linked up when they raped me. They were all linked. We were trafficked to Telford, Hereford and Blackpool. I was 14 and 15 during this period when I was raped and trafficked regularly. My mum was so happy that I'd found friends, but she had no idea what was going on.
Just as I'd found in Rotherham and Rochdale, the gangs of abusers used the boyfriend model of exploitation to lure in their victims.
While my abusers threatened, raped and violated me, they were also kind, but it would change. They called us gory girls, white bitches, white slags. When I eventually got my police records back, there are 200 to 300 pages about how I'd been strangled, threatened with a knife, someone was sent to petrol bomb my house. I was raped over 1,000 times and I don't even know how many men assaulted me. It was just a thing that happened to us, and it might sound crazy, but it was just normal. It felt normal. It's all we knew.
Emily's suffering represents one story in a much wider pattern of abuse. This crisis was not isolated to a few towns. It had swept the country. Reports from Rotherham, Rochdale and Telford were joined by stories from dozens of other towns and cities. This national scandal required a national response. My name is Charlie Pieces, and I'm a journalist and documentary filmmaker with GB News. We've heard about how the police and councils failed victims, but what did the government do? In 2018, Home Secretary Sajid Javid announced the Home Office review into grooming gangs. It was a big moment. A British Muslim minister was brave enough to look at whether Pakistani men really were overrepresented as abusers. But in the aftermath of the Windrush scandal, the department was hypersensitive about race and did its best to block the report's publication. It took 130,000 signing a petition for it to be released. But the report was a whitewash. It limply concluded that data collection on ethnicity was so poor that it was impossible to know the truth. Rather than improve data collection, it said that the majority of abusers were white. However, The report it based that on found that 30% of abusers were white and 28% were Asian, despite whites making up 85% of the population and Asians just 8%. Clearly, Asians were vastly overrepresented in this kind of child abuse, being over 3 times more likely to be an abuser. But the report didn't mention it. However, it did find space to say that racial bias could be to blame for the prominence of Pakistanis in the national conversation about grooming gangs. More recently, a National Crime Agency report cited a study which found that Pakistanis dominate national grooming gang statistics. By comparing the number of prosecutions to the overall population, it showed that 1 in every 2,200 Muslim men over 16 in England and Wales had been prosecuted for this crime from 1997 to 2017. When it came to Pakistanis, it was 1 in 1,700. In Rochdale, 1 in 280 Muslim males over 16 were prosecuted. In Telford, it was 1 in 126. In Rotherham, 1 in 73. The report pointed out that many abusers take no responsibility for their crimes and plead not guilty. They take no responsibility because they can get away with it. When they return from their limited punishments, the community often does not ostracize them. And as these damning figures show, with such high rates of prosecution, their crimes can't have been a secret.
I'll pause here for a bit. Sister M, why these Pakistani Mr. Muslims are able to get away with these things?
Well, it seems that they deny any responsibility or
And they're appealing as not guilty. It's not like,
not guilty, not guilty, Your Honor. We've talked about this before. In Islam, it's totally permissible to lie, so that's not a big deal. In Islam, it's totally permissible to take non-Muslim women as your right-hand possession, so not a big deal. I mean, what are they guilty of according to Islam? Nothing at all.
So therefore, the appeal is not guilty.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on 1 in 73, 1 in 126? Those are not just numbers. Those are individuals who thought it was all right to rape our next generation. 1 in 73. That's very, very big number.
Oh, yeah.
Very, very big number.
That means, imagine this. Imagine you're a young Muslim girl in Rotherham and you go to Friday night prayers at the local mosque. And although you're in a different area, but, quite a few of those men over there are responsible for that kind of thing. Maybe even your own family members. That's a high number.
Very big number.
Mm-hmm.
Beloved, any comments?
Yeah, there's a reason why they plead not guilty, because remember, sister, that man who was prosecuted and 3 of his brothers and 1 of his uncles.
Oh, yeah.
So if all your brothers do it, your uncles do it, all your kebab shop friends do it, you think there's nothing wrong with it. Everyone else doing it, so I think it's normal. So it was normal for those girls, those victims. Remember, she said it was normal. It was also normal for those criminals. They thought it was normal life.
Yeah, that's what we do. I remember there was a case where Mr. Muslim said, this is normal. Like he raped someone, and then he said, this is normal in my culture. And then judge was, oh yeah, he didn't know it. It's not normal in our culture, and then let him go. Yeah.
There's quite a few of those stories. I think several from like Austria and places like
Germany.
that. Yeah, and Germany. And oftentimes it would be raping a little boy and making the case of, oh, this is culturally okay back home.
Yeah.
And judges are, oh, so sorry. I didn't realize you're from a different place. Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
no problem. Off you go.
Or like, oh, I'm sorry, we kept you here for like last 20 minutes. How do you want to get back home?
Let's give you millions of pounds.
Do you need a lift?
Yeah, do you need a lift? Yeah. There was a case like one of the, I think it was in Germany, when Mr. Muslim raped a couple of German girls. He expressed that he couldn't control himself and it was normal.
Mm.
And he was able to get away with that.
Mm-hmm.
So, as Daughter of Christ said, your uncle does it, your brothers does it. This is what you think it's normal because they look at the book and then that book justifies everything. Yeah.
You give it for a birthday present, like a cake, like it's cake.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Give you a human being.
Overall, it is very much disgusting. And I do hope that those of you who are listening, you are finding this is disgusting. Because once your feelings are being affected, you will try to do something about it. Police doesn't do. Police becomes dimmy. Councils are dimmy. Schools are dimmy. But we can't be dimmy. We are people who are belong to Christ. We can't be dimmy and we can't turn blind eye to those such a things. Let me continue.
126. In Rotherham, 1 in 73. The report pointed out that many abusers take no responsibility for their crimes and plead not guilty. They take no responsibility because they can get away with it. When they return from their limited punishments, the community often does not ostracize them. And as these damning figures show, with such high rates of prosecution, their crimes can't have been a secret. This lack of responsibility and community punishment has been linked to clannish attitudes among British Pakistanis. To learn more, I sat down with Wazeek, a British Pakistani Muslim researcher.
I think there is a culture within some of these British Pakistani communities where the perpetrators feel that white working class girls do not equal the same as those within their own community.
When Ruby was interviewed, in her video interview, she said in evidence that she had been chosen by this man because she was a white girl and these men wanted a white girl to abuse. She also talked of them passing her round in a circle as though she was a ball, with a circle of Pakistani abusers who would go into a flat and they would use that flat for the night. They'd take one white girl into that flat and they would all abuse her.
But many people were desperate to blur the lines. One of the ways they ensured the focus was not put on British Pakistanis was through the use of the umbrella term Asian, which deflected attention away from the sad reality.
I think the term Asian isn't always appropriate. When we do look at, again, the demographic of perpetrators, we are seeing that they're mostly British Pakistanis.
I know that these gangs are often referred to as Asian grooming gangs, but I would always say, well, I have yet to come across any man from Thailand or Japan or China who are involved in these grooming gangs. They are predominantly Pakistani, British, Muslim men. And that is not racist, it is a fact.
If the police, councils, government...
Okay, I'll pause here. There are a couple of points. So, police officer, ex-police officer, identifies they are not Asians, they are Pakistani Muslim men who are raping our girls. And it's been also expressed that those girls are being raped because Pakistani Muslim men who are raping them do not see non-Muslim women as equal to Muslim. Any thoughts, beloved?
I wonder where they get that from.
You wonder?
Where they get that? Where do these Pakistani Muslim men get the idea that that white girls are not the same as ones from their own?
Let's wonder on that.
It's a mystery. It's cultural.
It's like the program comes to a point where there's a conclusion and then they don't say it. They let you make the conclusion. Yeah, those Asian men are not anything else. Hindus, Buddhists, no.
Not from
there
Taiwan.
There are some Pakistani Christians, you know. No, they're Pakistani Muslim men. Okay.
Yeah, and there's Pakistani Sikhs as well, but it wasn't them either.
So where what is it though? What is it?
But did you pick up? Mrs. Police was saying, identifying them as what they are, Pakistani Muslim men who are raping those girls. That's not a racist, but that's a fact. Yet, her colleagues, councils, and everyone else who is involved identify that as a racist.
No, it's more racist to say Asian because you're including all Asian countries in that umbrella.
Yeah.
You're including China and Japan and Sri Lanka and Malaysia.
Nepal.
Why? You shouldn't do that. Like, I would hate for people to do that to me. I want people to be specific when someone commits a crime.
They were Pacific, sister. They were men of the certain ethnicity engaged in a particular occupation.
That's anyone. You're of a certain ethnicity engaged in a particular occupation. So am I. It doesn't mean anything.
So are we able to solve the mystery? What is it that Pakistani Muslim men who are raping those white girls don't see those white girls as equal with their own?
Yeah, which ideology tells them that people who do not wear the hijab can be abused and non-Muslim girls and women are different from Muslim girls and women?
Which ideology? Okay, let's ask that to our audience. Anyone is able to guess? You've got like loads of options, okay?
Yeah, but don't be racist and don't be Islamophobe when you answer the question.
Yes.
It's like tying your hands. You want to feel like tearing your hair out.
You can't even tell the truth.
You can't. The truth is not racist and the truth is not sexist. The truth is the truth.
Any additional comments, MM?
No, it would be racist to point to any passages in the Quran that says, a non-Muslim woman is deemed less than a Muslim woman, although a Muslim woman is deemed rather low in the first place, but a non-Muslim woman is even lower than that. And then just in general, non-Muslims, worst of creatures, but that would be racist if I said that they were worst of creatures, so I shan't say it.
Yeah, so you can't say it. So we let everyone to kind of come up with their own version of the truth. But as you come up with your own version of the truth, just remember there is only one option. And that option is Islam. Followers of Islam, following the teachings of Islam, therefore, they do not see non-Muslim beings equal with Muslims. They do not see people who are not covered as normal people. So therefore, you are there to be abused. And it all comes from the teachings of Islam. Surah 33, 59. And remember, Allah made Muslims like above all. And Sister Emma expressed that it's the Jews and Christians who are the worst of creatures. So as you kind of try to figure out which ideology this must be, don't be racist. Just go with the truth. You've got only one option. You can't make a mistake in this one. Unless you are Mr. Policeman, unless you are counselor, unless you are the groomer, you wouldn't forget the answer. You will know the answer. Continue. Yeah.
White girl, and these men wanted a white girl to abuse. She also talked of them passing her round in a circle as though she was a ball, with a circle of Pakistani abusers who would go into a flat and they would use that flat for the night. They'd take one white girl into that flat and they would all abuse her.
But many people were desperate to blur the lines. One of the ways they ensured the focus was not put on British Pakistanis was through the use of the umbrella term Asian, which deflected attention away from the sad reality.
I think the term Asian isn't always appropriate. When we do look at, again, the demographic of perpetrators, we are seeing that they're mostly British Pakistanis.
I know that these gangs are often referred to as Asian grooming gangs, but I would always say, well, I have yet to come across any man from Thailand or Japan or China who are involved in these grooming gangs. They are predominantly Pakistani, British, Muslim men. And that is not racist, it is a fact.
If the police, councils, government and the media had confronted the stark truth about the grooming gangs, the abuse of thousands of girls could have been avoided. Failing to accept these facts has allowed hundreds, if not thousands of abusers to hide behind the veil of political correctness.
We've seen some British Pakistanis who have been reluctant to deal with this issue and have been in absolute denial that this issue is taking place. The reason why is because they don't want to bring shame on their own family.
I think the racial dynamics of this particular kind of sexual abuse have meant that it has not been discussed in the way it should have been in the media, because people in positions of authority have always been frightened of being called racist. With this particular kind of crime, it is irrefutable, in my experience from all the cases that I have dealt with, that the vast majority of the abusers in these cases are Pakistani men.
Political correctness doesn't just mean good manners, it has consequences. And one of those consequences was the abandonment of thousands of girls to years of abuse for fear that tackling the problem would look racist. Even now, there are those who deny the awkward reality. When the independent inquiry into child sex abuse investigated the issue in 2022, they looked at areas where grooming gangs had not been found. Rotherham was mentioned only once in 400 pages. It found the police were still regularly failing to collect data on ethnicity. A Home Office spokesperson said that it is now mandatory for police forces to record the ethnicity of those arrested. Telford and Wrekin Council said that after the inquiry into child sexual abuse in the town, the council immediately accepted all of the recommendations and that they've subsequently improved. Rotherham Council said they were profoundly sorry for the pain this has caused, and that care for the most vulnerable children has been transformed since 2014 and is now of a good quality. South Yorkshire Police Deputy Chief Constable Tim Forber said that they had listened to the voices of those affected and learnt the lessons of the past, and that they would act quickly to safeguard those most at risk. West Mercia Police said that significant improvements have been made and that they continue to improve and develop our understanding. Greater Manchester Police did not respond to our request for comment.
I don't smoke, drink or do drugs, and I've escaped that life. I have a daughter, but the men who raped me in Telford and South Wales are still living there, still working there, still running the kebab houses. My life was ripped to shreds, but theirs have barely changed.
I think it's still a problem throughout the country. You know, Rotherham's not...
I'll pause here for a bit. So we heard the response policies gave. Are you satisfied what police how police responded? Because it wasn't only one or two police, it was like police officers, police after police, and only few of them didn't bother to respond. But are you satisfied with what you heard?
I will not be satisfied until every single one of those grooming gangs are brought to justice and served the full term and not being let off midway And this lady said that there are hundreds of abusers, and the latest lady victim was speaking. She said the abusers are still working and running the kebab shops. You know what these kebab shops are a front for. So they're still doing it, really. They're still free. So that's what will satisfy me. Not this, we'll improve nonsense.
Sister Em?
Empty apology. There's no action in that apology. There's no holding to account the police officers that allowed all of this to happen, the ones that didn't do anything about the missing evidence and all of these kinds of things, the council members that were responsible, the sudden pulling of funding here and there. Those people need to be held accountable, and those people need to be sent to prison as well. Then I'll believe that actually, no, they might be sorry if they're actually sending their own into prison because it's their responsibility to keep these children safe. And these children came to them and even said, actually, you can't help me. You can't protect me. They've already got my family. They've burnt down someone else's house. They've done this, they've done that. You can't help me. Those police officers need to be held accountable. Those that pulled the funding need to be held accountable. Those in the council that said, no, it's just a culture of child prostitution. What on earth is a culture of child prostitution since the 80s? What is that? That's ridiculous. Once they send those people to prison, then I might believe that they're sorry.
So I think we're all agreeing, saying, we learned our lessons, we will be careful in the future. Sorry for the hurt because blah, blah is not enough. Police officers needs to be held accountable. Their boss needs to be held accountable. People who are over their authority needs to be held accountable. Councils needs to be held accountable. And those criminals needs to be in the right place. And right place is not out on the streets or in the kebab shops. Right place is behind the bars. Then, we deal with your sorry. And of course, I thought you will bring it up, but you didn't bring it up, beloved. You don't want your money back?
I do. I want all those since the 70s time they've been taxing people and not doing their job. Either a lot of people need to lose their jobs, or you need that money back. I'm not satisfied with them writing, okay, then we'll document the ethnicity. That's okay, and put it in a file somewhere in a desk. No, I want you on the street. I don't want you, no more filing. On the street, taking these people in.
Just do your job.
Please.
Do your job to protect those children.
Not respond to our request for comment.
I don't smoke, drink or do drugs, and I've escaped that life. I have a daughter, but the men who raped me in Telford in South Wales are still living there, still working there, still running the kebab houses. My life was ripped to shreds, but theirs have barely changed.
I think it's still a problem throughout the country. You know, Rotherham's not unique. We've not got an electric fence around us, and this is happening everywhere, in every town, in every city. And I think, you know, there's a lot of things that can be done, and I think it's got to start at government level.
They made the judgment that these children didn't matter, and these children, more than any other children, needed somebody to fight their corner, and yet they were just left high and dry. And I want to see chief constables, I want to see senior officials held legally to account for their neglect of duty, because if that was me as an ordinary detective constable who had not recorded a criminal damage, I would be facing disciplinary action and probably a prosecution. So why are they any different?
I don't even know if the word's angry. I think the word's probably shocked that we sit here today in 2022 and not one person has ever been held accountable for what happened in this town, ever. Even when the evidence proves without a shadow of a doubt they knew about it.
What were being normalised were the rapes, the abuse, older men being passed off as older boyfriends to children. It was normalised, you know. There's still two that I know of now that don't realise that they're a victim because they're still in that mindset of that it were normal, it were a part of growing up.
This is going on today. We've been approached by 60 victims in the last 3 days who are currently being failed by the police. It is not a historical problem. It is going on today. Very little has changed. We have seen trials, but all too often these children are still being judged and fobbed off, and that is not good enough.
The grooming gang scandal has now dragged on for decades. Despite the prosecutions, most abusers have still escaped justice. In Rotherham, where the National Crime Agency now says 1,510 girls were raped, only 43 people have been convicted.
People I've spoken to warn me that not only is the abuse still going on, it's actually getting worse.
Despite this, Rotherham has been declared as the 2025 Children's Capital of Culture.
There are also many places across the country where no inquiry has been held into what's going on. If small towns like Rotherham, Rochdale and Telford have produced thousands and thousands of victims, it's likely that the real number across the country is in the tens of thousands.
We need to know what is going on. That's why it is essential that the National Crime Agency launch investigations into any place where credible allegations of grooming gangs have been made. It's why the police need to be held to account, whether it's for failing to collect data on ethnicity
or for not prosecuting criminals. It's also why we need stronger prison sentences for the rapists. No victim should see their abuser walk out of prison after only a few years. For too long, Britain's authorities have looked the other way and failed generations of girls. Now is the time for them to redeem themselves. Because if they don't, the same abuse will just keep happening.
I'll ask a practical question to both of you. Sister M and Beloved. A city which simply turns blind eye to over 1,500 girls to be raped by Pakistani Muslim men gets chosen as the capital city of what was the culture of the
Capital of culture.
Capital of the culture for kids. Children's capital of culture. I'm not someone who gives reward that easily. It's like very rare if thought of Christ hears like well done from me. But both of you are kind of British. Can you just tell me how it is works in British mind? A city simply watches over 1,500 girls are being raped, is chosen as the children's capital city of culture.
Well, Sister M is the most British here, so I'll let her answer that.
Yes, Miss British. How do you make those judgments?
Well, this is a tricky one, you see, because there's so many cities in England, and you could choose any one of those cities. Throw a rock at any one of those other cities, apart from the ones with the red dots that we saw in the map. And yes, that one. Thank you. So apart from those cities, you could, find a multitude more cities. Rotherham would not have made my shortlist. Ever.
So what is the so on the map? So you've got like kind of small island in the in west side of UK, and then there is like very, very small island in next to that. Like they are small. They're like in UK side. I don't know where it is. What is this place?
This time?
Do you
Which
see?
place are you pointing to?
You can't. Sorry, you can't see my. You can't see the mouse. I don't know. So it's end of UK border. Okay, that looks like a city which is not like connect the UK, and then you've got like another small island. Is like two islands. They are very close to UK. I was just thinking, maybe even those places who I have no idea what are they, can be chosen, but not Rotherham.
Yeah, not Rotherham. Yeah. You could choose the Isle of Wight even, and not Rotherham, and they had their own scandals of other things. But no, seriously, it's just mind-blowing. Why Rotherham, of all the places that they could have chosen for the children's cultural capital, blah de blah, Rotherham, really, where the most horrific child abuse took place, that's the one you're going to choose?
So I was asking you the place called Holyhead.
Ah, Holyhead. Is that
that's
part of Wales, I think?
I don't know where it's on the map. I can see it on the map. It's here. It's here, very small. Looks like more islandish thing to me.
Yeah.
I was just like, I never seen that in the map before. Like that place can be chosen, but not the other.
No, not Rotherham. No.
Okay, so you wouldn't make that choice, but what about how come like British mind made that choice, sister?
It's baffling. It is baffling. And then, you know, as a lot of those people in the interview said, that there was no one, and in fact the charity worker said that there was no one from Rotherham that was prosecuted for their responsibilities. No one in the council, no one in the police, no one was prosecuted for their responsibility in Rotherham. So how on earth that they would gain any kind of accolade of, you know, bravo, this is the children's cultural capital, it doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense to me.
Okay, beloved, any thoughts?
I'm thinking they based this culture thing on the number of kebab houses that are in a city, and the number of
houses,
and then more importantly, the number of certain ethnic men of certain of a particular occupation. That's the measure of culture, apparently, because that's how you choose. And Rotherham is number one for that. So yes. And it involves children, so it is that, you know, it depends what culture you're talking about. If it's a culture of child abuse, they've got it right. I remember, sister, not long ago, I said to you that my city was once chosen for culture, the UK's capital for culture in one of those years, and you said to me that's not a good thing. Now I understand why.
It's not a good thing. Like, with such a history, it's not even history. Like, Miss Police Officer, ex-police officer says that, so this has been recorded, I think, just before end of the year. She says within last 3 days, 60 girls got in touch with her, and then this is still happening. And still people who should be kept accountable and responsible are just like enjoying their own life, while victims are, all of their life is being changed.
Yeah,
that was the end of the video. So as I said, we took the video from GB News documentary of grooming gangs, Britain's shame. I'll put the link again in this under this video for you to go and watch it without our commentaries. And I really hope that it not only breaks your heart, but it crushes your heart, hearing again and again how everyone turned blind eye and no one thought those children had any value. And it is still going on. Sister M, would you be, we've been live almost 2 hours, would you be able to kind of share your conclusion thoughts? I'm not going to ask you to share your conclusion feelings.
Definitely not the feelings, please.
Not the feelings, but if you be kind enough and then share your conclusion thoughts, that will be very helpful. And then I'll let Daughter of Christ to share some of her thoughts and feelings, and then we finish the evening.
Okay, so a very hard documentary to watch, but it's reality. It's like, as our sister Hatun just said, it's reality. It's not just something that was, happened in the past. It's still happening now. These people are to be held accountable. I frankly don't care if they record their ethnicity or not. I don't care if they came from the moon. I just don't care. If you've committed the crime, you have to be prosecuted. And actually, I would persecute them, but that's a different matter. That's on to the feelings matter. These people, these crimes that they've done against the most vulnerable of our society, which are children, it's really despicable. That's why I keep struggling to express myself clearly on this matter. It's the most heinous of crimes to abuse children. So in this country, it ought to be that I don't care who you are, where you're from. If you abuse a child, you will be sent to prison and you will serve your full time. And frankly, if you're not from this country, I don't see why we ought to be, accommodating you any further. You ought to be deported. You ought to be deported after you've served your time. That's my feelings on the matter. I know we said we weren't going to talk about the feelings. And if anyone notices anything like that happening in their area, because although this is England, it could be happening in other parts of Europe, it could be happening in parts of America. Just because you live in a different country, don't think that you are exempt from this kind of horrible thing happening. If you do see it, and as much of chocolate teapots that the British police have proved themselves to be, you must report it. I would say you must report it and follow up and say, if this doesn't get dealt with, I'm going to be reporting the officer that I reported it to. That's how I see it.
Thank you very much, Sister M. Beloved, your thoughts, your feelings?
I think in terms of recording the ethnicity, what's more important is recording the ideology, what those men believe, what they think, what is it that they believe in that gave them license to commit these crimes, and that is the religion of Islam. Once we put our finger on the real issue, then we know how to deal with it. And that's what the authorities really ought to face, unfortunately, no matter how uncomfortable it makes them feel and makes the protected group feel. It's time that we face the facts, okay? This has been happening since the 70s. Thousands upon thousands of girls. The reports, the documentary said tens of thousands. When will it be enough when they've gone after your children in that way nationwide for decades and passing them along passing them to their families and their nephews and their uncles and their brothers? When will it be enough? Prosecute is one way of dealing with it, going hard against them with sentencing and punishment, yes. But the real evil is in a book called Quran, okay? That's what needs to be done. We need to bring Jesus back into our country, into our education system. We need to bring Jesus back to come back to him as a nation, because I feel that what's happening is partly perhaps God's judgment on the UK for them forsaking him and allowing a death cult to dictate their values and what they're sensitive to and what they're afraid of saying and all that political correctness, when the correctness that they should be having is values from the Lord Jesus Christ, that comes hard and comes against this kind of darkness and evil, facing it properly rather than tiptoeing around it and beating around the bush and allowing them to go into our homes and abuse our children. That's all, sister.
Thank you very much, beloved. So what we have here is 40 plus minutes video, gives us a summary of what police and councils and schools officially knew since 2004, and how they intentionally failed to do anything to protect these kids. Since 2004 up to today, it is still going on. There are numbers were circulating that there is a, like, it is even shame, Daughter of Christ said, like, expressed that it's only 10,000. Numbers is around 10,000. It is shame that in Britain, we don't even know today how many kids are being raped. We don't even know the numbers. We know it's happening, but we don't even know the numbers. That says a lot about how police is turning blind eye. A couple of years ago, there were numbers circulating around as 300,000 girls in Britain. It is such a shame we don't even know the number of the victims. It says, oh, like a lot actually. Everyone turned blind eye. Everyone turned blind eye. I did express yesterday, I'll express it again, as a Christians, as people who are belong to Christ, we cannot turn blind eye, especially when it happens to kids. We cannot turn blind eye. People will ignore the justice in this world. We heard police officers turn blind eye to justice. But as a Christian, we are confident we have a just judge who is going to come and judge the world justly. Everyone will be held accountable for the things they have done. Maybe certain people are able to get away with certain things in this world, but when the just judge turns up, no one is able to get away with these things. Psalm 98. I read Psalm 98 and we finish from there. Shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth. Burst into jubilant songs with music. Make music to the Lord with the harp and sound of singing, with trumpets and blast of the ram's horn. Shout for joy before the Lord the King. Let the sea resound and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. Let the rivers clap their hands. Let the mountains sing together for joy. Let them sing before the Lord, for he comes to judge the earth. He will judge the world in righteousness and the peoples with equity. Just judge is going to turn up. As a Christian, I am waiting that joyfully. But people who were involved in this grooming, raping events in Britain and all around the world, I am afraid to say, when Lord Jesus Christ turns up as a judge, it's going to be a terrible day for them. People can turn blind eye today, but when the King turns up, we won't be able to turn blind eye. Beloved ones, be ready when the just judge turns up. Until just turns up, please make your part. Look out for those who don't have voice. Get in touch with your MPs. Get in touch with your police officers in your police station close to you. Do your part. Don't let our next generation to be abused. Don't close your eyes. Do not close your ears. We will be accountable every time when we turn blind eye. Book of Amos talks about it, like we can't turn blind eye when we see injustice. With that note, Sister M, thank you very much for joining us, and beloved of Christ, daughter of Christ, thank you very much for joining us as well. By God's grace, we will see you on another live stream. Until we see you, may Christ crucified, who is going to turn up as a just judge, silent you with his love.